Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of the Flyover League. Jamie Plunkett here with Noah Darling, who is ready to give you all three big booms, one each, for the three home runs Quentin Coates and Jack Natilli hit in their 20-10 win on Saturday over Utah. Noah, the floor is yours.
We'll see how the show goes. We'll see how many booms I can land. Because I'm not going to settle on three. I know Jack and Quentin thought three was enough. I'm historically in the five big booms category, but you got to get me there first. Warm me up a little bit. Yeah, what a fun weekend in the Big 12. And I think when we were talking about our matchups that the conference laid out for us, our tasty little treats of this past weekend, it was really kind of a separation weekend of sorts, and finding out who belongs where and what shakes up how in a league that had a little bit of everybody looked good and everybody looked bad at the same time. And there's a little bit of a consensus at this point. And my hot take that you might put me on the spotlight a little bit is I think that the league might already be decided. I'm not gonna, bet my life on that, but there was something I said that if this happened, maybe, and it happened.
It did happen. I wasn't going to call you out on it. I didn't know if that was something
Right?
you needed to be public with yet. I don't think it's decided.
Okay. All right.
And we can get into the whys of both of our sides of the argument there in just a little bit. But man, what another week of Big 12 baseball. Very cool. The way that things are shaking out. I think if you had told both of us at the outset of the season that 2 weekends into Big 12 play, the two teams tied atop the standings would be West Virginia and UCF, that would be pretty surprising and entertaining for both of us. And if you told us that the team second to last was Arizona, I think we would be equally surprised with that result as well. So just some chaos happening in the Big 12. A lot of fun baseball being played around the league, and 7 very entertaining series going down this past weekend all across Big 12 country. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first one. Noah, Cincinnati takes 2 of 3 from Utah. Since he wins on Friday 13-4, Saturday 20-10, a ridiculous score. And then Utah saves the weekend with a 13-11 back and forth victory. Very chaotic game. Neither of the bullpens were really up to the task at any point this weekend. There were a couple really good moments from a couple of them, but just starting off with Cincinnati and Utah, kind of what were some of your big thoughts there?
Well, you touched on the bullpen right away. I noticed that there were 2 different games that kind of turned into a bullpen game for each team. On Saturday, it was Cincinnati who struggled with Luke Knight getting going. He only made about an inning and a third, and then it was a bullpen game from then on because that's just how sports work. And then on Sunday, it was a little bit more of a by design bullpen game. It appeared for Utah, who didn't have much length from anybody. They all went about 1 or 2 innings, and it ended up being your typical Sunday game in the Big 12. But that Friday game really drew eyeballs when you think about Nate Taylor and Coulter McAnally going against each other. There are only so many matchups on the calendar like that in the Big 12, and it feels like Coulter is going to be involved in a lot of those. And he went 5 no-hit innings, and then all of a sudden the Cincinnati offense said, we figured this guy out. And they quickly threw 8 runs on the board, and all of a sudden Cincinnati was up big, and the offense didn't exactly stop on Friday night.
No, it did not. Saturday's game, you look at the score. If you just looked at the final score, you would assume, oh, okay, Cincinnati just jumped all over them, ran away with it. That is not the case. Utah led in this baseball game 10-2, seemed to be in pretty good control, and then Quentin Coates and Jack Natilli decided, no, we're in control. We are the captains now, and they each hit 3 home runs. It's a program record. Both of them individually tied the record for most home runs by a player in a single game, and then they became the first pair of teammates in Cincinnati history, I believe, to hit 3 home runs in a single game. So a pretty historic offensive explosion for the Bearcats to clinch that series win. And even in the loss on Sunday, very, very capable offense. This is a fun lineup top to bottom. And, the thing with Utah being they finally did get the amount of offense that they needed to win a baseball game. They had to really kind of dig deep for it there late in the 9th inning. But they made it happen. And I think that's a testament to kind of their willpower. This is a baseball team that we've both spoken pretty highly of over the first month and a half of the season. And it was good to see them show some fight when the series was already lost, because it would be really easy for teams. And there are a couple this week that didn't have as much success on Sunday as maybe they had hoped when they were also trying to salvage a series. So good on Utah for getting that win, coming away with one in a road trip weekend to Cincinnati. And, like we were talking about with Utah prior to the season, if they can get an extra win here and there, that's really great. They did that last weekend against Arizona. Taking 1 of 3 from Cincinnati on the road isn't the worst thing in the world. And now you can come back home, hopefully get 2 of 3 again, and you're still on pace to have a pretty successful conference season.
That's what I say in quotations. They say, whoever they is, they say you take 2 or 3 at home, and then you try and win 1 of 3 on the road, because that's what's going to happen. If you're going to win 2 or 3, the other team wins 1 of 3. It's only fair that you get yours on the road, and that's exactly what Utah's done to start Big 12 play. Hard to complain, even though it was at times really scary to face this Cincinnati offense. Christian Mitchell, Derek Pitts. It just feels like if somebody has a night off, there's going to be somebody else in that Bearcat lineup that does not have a night off, and in fact will roll it into an overall very productive weekend. It feels like there's been a new guy alongside Quentin Coates who's been very consistent that has joined the Cincinnati party offensively each weekend, and this week it was kind of the combination of everybody, and you got it all at once for poor old Utah, who still positive takeaways from a series loss.
I will shout out Bradley Navarro for Utah. He had a couple of home runs on the weekend, had a really good weekend. Went 3 for 5 on Sunday and delivered the game-tying double there in the top of the ninth, I believe, with 2 outs. And then Matt Flaherty came in and drove in the final 2 runs of the game there. Caden Soder as well, a guy who had only made 1 appearance so far this season, a JUCO transfer for the Utes, I believe from the College of Southern Nevada. Got the save. 3, and it came in with a runner on first and no outs in the bottom of the ninth. An opportunity for Cincinnati to kind of jump on a guy, which they've done so often this year. And he got 2 strikeouts and a ground out to end the game, made it a really kind of casual, oh, yep, no, we're done here kind of situation for the Utes. So maybe they have found a little bit of a bright spot in that bullpen in Caden Soder. We'll be interested to see how his role develops over the next couple of weeks for Utah. So not all bad from the Utes. And I think that's kind of the theme of the show today is even those teams that lost, and even one of the teams that got swept, frankly, in Houston, did not, by my, kind of qualifications, have a bad weekend. We'll get into Houston and Kansas in a little bit, but I want to get into, first of all, any more notes about Cincinnati, Utah before we kind of move on here?
Nothing tremendously, just a fun series. It felt very Cincinnati. When they're at home, the Bearcats feel like the Bearcats. Hopefully they can find a way to do that on the road, because they got thumped by BYU, and people aren't going to forget that if we're going to talk about how good Cincinnati is.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the more interesting results of the first 2 weekends. I think BYU might have more juice than we anticipated, especially in the lineup. Again, we can get into that a little bit later down the road, because I really want to get into what we dubbed as the series of the weekend. That was Arizona State heading up to Manhattan, Kansas to face the Kansas State Wildcats. They go on the road and get 2 of 3. Very, very emphatic response by Kansas State on Sunday, but Arizona State was largely in control of this series from the jump. They win on Friday 5-4. They get another Landon Harrison home run. It's kind of just written into the script at this point for Arizona State. As is Derek Schaefer getting a save and Dean Toigo doing something interesting as well. The latter of whom did several interesting things in Saturday's 18-12 win, including a grand slam in the 9th that broke things open when Kansas State was trying desperately to kind of hang on. It didn't end up hanging on there with, I believe, what was an 8-run 9th inning, something like that. Really impressive weekend from the Sun Devils overall. I know they dropped Sunday. We can get into that a little bit here, but starting with Arizona State, just wildly impressive from them. And I don't know if you want to talk about it. This kind of leads into your, it may be over situation.
That was the situation that I was alluding to when we do our Big 12 pick'em. A lot of votes were coming in for Arizona State to win the series, and I just thought K-State at home, they're playing really well right now too. Maybe they'll take 2 or 3. In fact, I'm going to pick them to take 2 or 3. And I don't know if anybody had Arizona State sweeping. Obviously, they didn't. But I said, man, it feels like if ASU wins this, we might be in the conversation. There's a fly flying around me. This is insane. But we might be in the conversation of the Big 12 maybe being over. Now, of course, anything can happen. The league does not have an asterisk next to it by any stretch, but it feels like with the way Arizona State's schedule sets up, that this sets up really nicely for them. They still have West Virginia this weekend, which is maybe the toughest challenge in the entire Big 12, but they do get them at home. And then you get Arizona, Utah, BYU, Baylor, UCF. This is looking all the way down to May. Oklahoma State and Houston to close it out. So I'm not shaking in my boots at much of that if I'm Arizona State. Now, of course, this is March and college baseball peaks in late May and June, so there's a long way to get there. And you don't want to look ahead on your schedule for Willie Bloomquist, but beating TCU and beating K-State is a fantastic start to Big 12 play, because if you had lost those series, you'd really feel nervous about the potential of your team. So I'm going to celebrate what they have given us, and that's great offense, strong enough pitching with Cole Carlone on Friday, and the bullpen being a little bit dicey but stronger than it was last season, and 2 solid series victories.
Yeah, here. I mean, the thing with Arizona State from a pitching standpoint is, you've gotten Cole Carlone. Alex Overbay seems to really be settling into a Saturday role, and if you can just get to Derek Schaefer twice in a weekend, you've got a pretty good chance of coming away with a series win. Cole Klecker kind of got roughed up on Sunday. I think he gave up 11 runs, 9 earned in 4 2/3 innings of work. A stark contrast from his revenge game against TCU the weekend prior. But, bad starts happen. We've talked about this with a couple teams on past episodes, where if you have the talent and the ability to kind of withstand a bad start here and there, you're going to end up winning a lot of baseball games. And that's kind of the situation that Arizona State is in. Look, I think as far as it being over, obviously looking down the schedule, down the matchups that they have left, I think that's maybe a reasonable expectation to say that they're going to be in the top 2 or top 3 of the conference standings when things are all said and done. I'm so very looking forward to this weekend against West Virginia, not only because it's going to be a tall task in Tempe for them to take down the Mountaineers, but also, matchups like this can serve as tiebreakers down the road. And so even if they kind of clear every hurdle, if West Virginia takes 2 or 3 this weekend and also clears every hurdle, they've got some tough matchups down in May. I believe they play Kansas and TCU in May this year, but I think I don't know how tough TCU is going to be by May, frankly, but Kansas at least is looking like they're gaining some momentum. But you could get into a situation where we've got a tie for the regular season championship between Arizona State and West Virginia, and who knows what the rest of the season holds for UCF. But they've already cleared 2 pretty decent hurdles in Oklahoma State and TCU on their schedule. So it's going to be a fun race to the finish line here with 8 weeks left in conference play. And certainly it seems like Arizona State, among others, is going to be in the mix there.
And West Virginia knows a thing or two about tiebreakers. That's how they won the league last year. Asterisks or not, whether they couldn't control, good for them. So every game matters in this series. It feels like it's going to be really fun to watch, but Sunday is going to be really important for both clubs. Right now, West Virginia has Max Yell going on Sunday. Who knows how long that'll last, because it doesn't feel like he's a Sunday guy, but he's also an unbelievable guy on Sundays. But we'll get there with West Virginia.
Yes.
Before we move on, I do want to talk about Kansas State, because they were tremendous in this series in their own right. You almost have to feel a little bit sick if you're a Wildcat or a Wildcat fan and just think, man, if our bullpen was just a little bit more nails, this is a completely different series. Obviously, you give up the 8 runs or however many it was in that Saturday thriller that Arizona State ran away with in the 9th inning. But even on Friday, it got away from them a little bit. And then Sunday, you win in dramatic and not emphatic fashion is the word I was looking for. Not dramatic, because it was a run rule victory, essentially. And you look back and you say, man, if we can tighten up a few screws, we take 2 or 3 from this fairly easily. But instead, it's Arizona State looking like, here we are in the Flyover League discussing, have they won the league already? Whether you buy into that or not, maybe I don't even do it. But either way, that little tweak right there, you got to look back and think, man, I hope that doesn't cost us.
I don't think it will. I don't. It's just so hard to sustain winning series, especially when there's so much parity in the league. And the reality is that Kansas State is going to run into a lot of teams, I think, that don't have the depth of pitching that Arizona State has, especially in that starting rotation. So when you look at Kansas State right now, they've got 2 of the top 4 guys in the Big 12 in OPS. D. Kennedy is leading the way. with a 1.420 OPS. And there's Ty Smolinski, your guy, in fourth, not too far behind him with a 1.241 OPS, actually tied with Colin Ritchie for fourth now that I'm looking at this. Quentin Coates and Landon Harrison stand between them. That makes a ton of sense because both those guys have been on heaters so far this year. But Kansas State has one of the more potent offenses in the league, and they flexed it for the majority of the weekend, like you said. And it's not just Quentin Coates, but we've talked about Shintaro Inoue, we've talked about Carlos Vasquez, Ty Smolinski, AJ Vasco is another guy who's had a really good season. Micah Kendrick has been hitting the ball incredibly hard from the DH spot. I believe Bear Madliak had a home run. It didn't really matter on Saturday, but he did have a home run as well. This is a team that top to bottom is a threat to hit the ball hard places. They showed that on Sunday, got to vent a little bit from dropping the first two games of the weekend. And I think that, on those days where the pitching is a little bit suspicious for them, they can still overcome that most of the time. They just ran into one of the only teams that was kind of equipped to handle their style of baseball this weekend. So, I don't take too many concerns away from this weekend if I'm a Kansas State fan, just because you played one of the better teams in the league. You went toe to toe, and there's a lot of runway left to kind of make up that ground that you lost.
And the huge silver lining is kind of the elephant in the room that we've been circling the last few weeks. Lincoln Sheffield on Sundays, he was great. He obviously got tremendous run support as well from your offense, but at the same time, him coming in on Sunday and shutting down an Arizona State offense that had been on fire, that's valuable. And whether that's by design or not, well played to have him on Sunday. I apologize for my doubt.
Speaking of Sunday guys, Lincoln Sheffield obviously was great. Camden Wicker for UCF was also excellent on Sunday in a rubber match game in Fort Worth between the Knights and TCU. He went 5 no-hit innings against the Horned Frogs. He lasted 6 2/3 through 101 pitches, only allowed 1 hit, and it was a double to Jack Bell that broke up the no-no. But he was phenomenal for UCF as they take that series 2-1 from TCU. They blasted TCU on Friday. It was just an absolute splattering, 18-7. TCU issued 12 walks. I believe UCF scored 7 runs in either the second or the third, and then another 8 in the 9th inning, mostly on walks. Just not a great showing from TCU's pitching outside of one guy really on Saturday. But Camden Wicker, another guy on Sunday who probably is going to be stuck in that role for a little while, considering the guys that he's behind, and Braden Smith and Matt Saucer, who's, oh my gosh, Matt Saucer's ERA, by the way, ballooned to .640 this weekend with the 2 earned runs he gave up. But I think he'll survive one way or another. Great weekend from UCF, especially on the mound. But the hitting, they put up 27 runs in 2 baseball games to take the series from the Horned Frogs, who look like things are really kind of teetering on the edge right now.
Well, unfortunately for UCF, they put up 0 in that other one if we're going to nitpick. But otherwise, the Knights, not only in standings form, but in just the eye test, have passed with flying colors because they entered the year with so much doubt. The narrative that we are, of course, very guilty of was that, they're better than they actually were, which is kind of a made-up phrase. But now they're literally playing better baseball than anybody expected. And it's really, really fun. I think that they've impressed as much as anybody in the league, probably in the country, you could argue, with their start to Big 12 play, especially after their non-conference slate where things started to get rocky a little bit. And you wondered, man, can these guys pitch out of the bullpen? And you don't need to pitch out of the bullpen as much when you have a really dynamite rotation. Who saw that coming? This UCF rotation, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you get Matt Saucer, and you think, wow, that's got to be a Friday guy, right? No, he's actually our Saturday guy. Okay. And then your Sunday guy throws 5 no-hit innings against, on paper, one of the league's best offense, who maybe hasn't lived up to that hype. But what a start for Rich Wallace's club. You hope it's sustainable, because when you talk about a team who underperformed last year, you have to wonder, when do they stop overperforming? Hopefully it doesn't happen. Hopefully this is UCF, because it feels like this is a club that should be able to sustain success in a nice area in Florida. Should be a lot of baseball talent there to build a program, the Power 5. We've seen several schools in other sports in the Big 12 take on more resources and succeed, and UCF hasn't done that as a school. Maybe baseball can kind of take that step and be a flagship model for the program, but it's just week 2. So there's a long way to go, but we've already declared Arizona State's winning the league. Maybe UCF can come in second.
Maybe so. I think anything kind of top 4, top 5 would be a wildly successful season for UCF. I had the chance to chat with Rich Wallace a little bit before the rubber match on Sunday. He was kind enough to give me a little bit of his time. I turned that into about a 2,000-word article over at Base 12 today for those who are interested in that. But we did talk a lot about program building and the way he's recruiting in Central Florida and just kind of his methodology for getting UCF into that upper echelon of Big 12 programs. And I thought it was really interesting. You know, we're talking about a head coach who was the recruiting coordinator at Notre Dame for 3 years under Link Jarrett and helped build that roster into one of the 3 Notre Dame baseball teams that's ever reached the College World Series in 2022. He then follows Link Jarrett to Florida State. Rough 2023, he's only there for 1 year, but helps lay the foundation for that Florida State roster that ended up going to the College World Series in 2024. So the guy has experience recruiting in multiple areas of the country. He has an understanding of what it takes to put a competitive roster together. And one of the things that he mentioned about this team in particular was that in 2024, when he got to UCF, he said there were 20 guys on the roster. We had to build quickly. He turned that team into a tournament team for the first time since 2017. Then he had to do it all again in 2025. He went a little bit younger. They regressed a little bit in year 2. And now he said he's got a lot of dependable depth. That was on display against TCU because he didn't have Austin Jacobs, who is their starting second baseman. Caden Gaskin filled in admirably in that role. And he didn't have Braden Calise, who's been out since the USF series starting at third base. Javier Crespo was phenomenal at third base for UCF this weekend, along with Andrew Williamson and Landon Moran and a couple of John Smith, all the other kind of usual suspects for UCF. Zach Skinner, he's been phenomenal as the transfer in from Lamar this year behind the plate. They've got a really good roster. I think they've got depth to compete, even when they have a couple of injuries like they do right now. And they've got a freshman class headlined by a kid like Jordan Lodies, who is ready to not only have success this year, but in the future with the Knights as well. So I was impressed by what I saw from them in person all weekend. And on the other side of that, I have probably more questions now about TCU than I did entering the weekend, just because it doesn't feel like help is on the way. And if this is who you're rolling with the rest of the year, I don't know how things can get much better.
Obviously, you have some inside track at TCU, so I'm not actually asking you here, but from the outsiders, it feels like eventually we're just going to get news that Tommy Labor is done. I don't know if that's the vibe that you're getting, because you actually might know, and maybe you can't say, but it just feels like up here, it just feels like the wheels are going to fall off unless things start to get rolling in the right direction. But this did not feel like a good series from just a purely vibes perspective. And I know that doesn't really matter on the field, but it felt like TCU had a chance to beat an upstart UCF team that was looking good. You get some momentum back, and it just didn't click. And then you get no hit for 5 innings on Sunday and a rubber match, and it just doesn't feel right for TCU. And I don't know what the issue is, like you said, but you're a lot closer to it than I am. Do you know what the issue is, Jamie Plunkett?
I mean, I don't. I think I'll just talk about a couple of things that I've noticed in post-game pressers and just being around the team. The first thing that I've noticed is that there's been a lot of kind of me versus we talk that has leaked into post-game press conferences, where either Sarlos or players are talking about, yeah, we're getting a lot closer. We're starting to play more for each other than for individual stats. And so that's an indicator, obviously, that maybe there's a little bit of selfishness happening about guys wanting to just pad stats, that kind of thing. That's way more difficult to do in baseball than, say, in garbage time in basketball or football. But maybe there's just, there's something to how well a group can gel when half of them are from the transfer portal or an incoming freshman class every year. Like how well can you maintain culture within a program? So there might be a little bit of that going on. I think really the reality is just the injury. They've kind of hit the threshold with injuries, whether that's, whether or not Tommy ends up coming back. I think based on the 8 to 10 week timeline we were given a couple weeks ago, he's around 7, maybe 6 weeks left on that timeline. I don't know if he ends up coming back at all this season. They have not made that decision, I don't think. I also don't know if Cade Udy's going to be back this season. Last I heard, he was getting a second opinion. He was supposed to be back this weekend. He was not. Noah Franco was on a very strict pitch count. He threw 18 pitches. Hardly any of them were in the strike zone, but they were thrown very hard, 97, 98 miles an hour, which was good to see. And so hopefully he can come back and be a difference maker for them. But, at the end of the day, this is not the team that we were anticipating from TCU from a performance standpoint. On paper, it's all there. Kirk Saarloos has been surprisingly despondent when it comes to how to approach the pitching issues that they have. He told me on Sunday, he's like, look, it's basically, it's really this simple. When we keep the ball down, we're a completely different team than when we leave the ball up in the strike zone. And he said, with Trevor Baumler's kind of poor performance on Sunday, said Lance Davis gave him the answers to the test. Lance Davis went 7 innings. He struck out 5. He earned Big 12 Pitcher of the Week. He was phenomenal for TCU. It was his best outing of the season and therefore his career because he's a redshirt freshman. And it's still, the execution just wasn't there on Sunday. I don't know if it's fully an execution thing. I don't know if there's something going on midweek with the development. I don't know. And what I do know is that they're not playing to the TCU standard, which is a phrase around TCU. And that is very upsetting for TCU fans at this point. There was a house fire behind the stadium on Sunday where plumes of black smoke were just pouring up into the sky. And everyone was talking about, oh, yes, those are the hopes and dreams of TCU baseball in 2026, just going up in flames. But you think you've seen the downside of TCU baseball Twitter to this point. I'm very concerned about what happens this upcoming weekend if Texas Tech comes to Fort Worth and takes 2 of 3 games from the Horned Frogs. Then we will see a whole nother level of panic and disparagement and discouragement from the Horned Frog faithful. That is not something that we want to see. We have witnessed it for basketball and football in recent years. Baseball would be at another level for this fan base. So we are maybe teetering on the edge of total chaos in TCU baseball land.
And you'll be right in the middle of it with.
Sure will.
Have you considered breaking out Hypnotoad? That seems to always work for you guys.
Hypnotoad does have a baseball version. It typically comes out when they're down by 1 or 2 runs in the 9th inning. And this season, they haven't really been able to break it out because they've been down by a lot more than that going into the 9th for the most part, or on the road. So we'll see. They got DBU on Tuesday. That is going to be an interesting matchup. And then you gotta show a little bit more life on the weekend against Texas Tech when they come to town.
Yeah, that'll be one to watch. Texas Tech can't seem to pitch, but they can seem to hit. And that's always the case with the Red Raiders, who are next on the sheet. I'm not going to transition. That's your thing.
Oh man, you were right there.
No. I can't do it. It's I'm the little pup. You're the big dog around here.
No.
You've got to transition us.
Oh, you just went full silent. Okay.
Yeah, you got to transition. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be the transition guy.
Yes. Well, yes. Texas Tech's bats have been fantastic at the rip this year, and this weekend it was really good to see that their offense travels. They were out at High Corbett Field against Arizona. They took 2 of 3. They scored 27 runs in 3 games, taking 2 of 3 from the series. A 9-5 win on Friday. Arizona gets Saturday 14-6, and then Texas Tech comes back in a really kind of back and forth fun baseball game, 12-10. This I think, we've talked a lot about the struggles of Arizona. They're another team that I think is kind of on the other side of that injury threshold. They've suffered a couple more injuries this weekend, as I understand it. But Texas Tech went into what was still a pretty good weekend starting rotation and did a lot of damage. And that's a really good sign if you're a Red Raider fan. Not only that you did it against good pitching, but you did it on the road, and it resulted in a road Big 12 series win.
If these Red Raiders could develop maybe one more arm in that rotation to go with, is it Perko, Lucas Pirko? It feels like it's pronounced differently every time I hear it.
Just do 50 one way, 50 the other, and it'll all even out.
All right, great. So Pirko, either way, good arm, I would say, as far as Texas Tech standards go. I think there was a stat floating around that he's one of 2 arms who have gone into the 5th inning now, and I believe Burns just joined him this weekend, going past the 5th inning as a starter. If they can get more of that in support of this offense, and I have to tip the cap. You did that math very quickly. You probably have your scores laid out differently than I do, but I
Just
was
looking at
still
the
doing
sheet here.
yeah, I was still doing the math on 27 by the time you were almost done talking, but I did fail geometry in ninth grade. But Caden Ferrero continues to just kind of be a glue guy for them, and I mean that as a compliment. I recently learned that glue guy is actually like kind of a diss. I don't mean it as a diss because Caden Ferrero has proven to be very, very important to that Tech lineup, and what a nice addition he's been. Uh, Overall, I'm waiting for the kind of egg to crack for Texas Tech, but it's not appearing to do that. As long as the offense supports this pitching staff, and taking a series against Kansas, now Arizona on paper looks phenomenal. But what are those programs really in 2026? We'll find out. But Kansas, like you said, appears to be gathering momentum. They swept Houston, so good for the Red Raiders.
Really good for the Red Raiders. And Connor Schaus did it both at the plate and on the mound for the Red Raiders. Really kind of flexed his two-way player ability there. Earned co-newcomer of the week in the league this week alongside the aforementioned Lance Davis, who got pitcher and co-newcomer of the week. I am becoming more and more a fan of Matt Quintanar every single time I watch the Red Raiders play. He is a phenomenal catcher defensively. I think he's grown tremendously since the start of the season in that role. When we talked to Tim Tadlock the first weekend of the season out in Arlington, he said at some point he wants Quintanar to be capable of calling pitches. I don't think he's there yet. I didn't notice if he was punching in anything on a little call pad or anything like that while behind the plate, but he is growing into an everyday catcher for the Red Raiders, and he's also continuing to do it with his bat. I have some stats. Let me see if I can find him. He did well this weekend, though. He was 5 of 12 with 6 RBIs, 2 doubles, and a home run. And when you're getting that kind of production from the catcher spot while also getting an above average catcher behind the plate, that's so valuable for this team. And that's a heck of a pitching staff to have to manage as a catcher right now, because they're kind of all over the place. The roles have not been settled really at all outside of the 3 starters. And at one point you got Connor Schaus coming in there and throwing another inning or two of work. So good on Matt Quintanar. He's become a favorite of mine so far, just following the Red Raiders this season. And like you said, don't really know when the other shoe is going to drop with Texas Tech, if it's ever going to drop with Texas Tech. Hopefully not, because that would be a fun season for them to have. But yeah, let's just take the wins and like it while we've got it. And on the other side, for Arizona, still a couple silver linings here and there, but really the sun's getting real low for the Wildcats.
It felt like that last injury, the names escaping me out of the bullpen, I wish I had it, was kind of the death knell. You talk about Tony Pluta and just some of the other ticky-tacky things and the lineup just not clicking. It feels like at some point that had to turn around. You thought Vegas, okay, they did it. They're back. Tony Lira is good. Nowitzki's looking like a nice piece in the lineup. And even then, with those guys still performing well, it just isn't coming together for Arizona, which is unfortunate. It feels different than the TCU situation somehow. I don't really know how to describe it. What makes those situations different? It might just be maybe there's still stronger belief that Arizona can do it. I don't know why that is, but I know it's not very smart of me to say. But it's interesting that on paper, the Big 12 does have 2 teams ranked in the D1 baseball poll, and neither of them are Arizona and TCU. That's another thing that probably would have slapped us in the face a few months ago.
It is. I'm scrolling through Michael Lev's Twitter feed right now to see if I can't find who these injured guys are, because there were a couple of them that he tweeted about, and I was foolish not to bookmark them when I saw them.
It was Drake, the Texas Tech transfer.
Yeah, JT Drake. Yeah.
Maybe there's no one since then. That's just kind of
a shortstop as well, I do believe. One of the younger kids got banged up as well, and then his replacement, a freshman, came in and also got banged up. So it's just, I don't know what's going on out at High Corbett. Maybe they need to replace the field, the playing surface or something. But yeah, not great health wise in Arizona or in Fort Worth for either of the Big 12 preseason favorites. Moving on, Kansas and Houston. One of the more interesting series of the weekend, in spite of it being a sweep for Kansas at home, right? You think, okay, Jayhawks took care of business. They won 12-10 on Friday, 9-8 on Saturday, 8-4 on Sunday. Boom, boom, boom. Check, please. Move on. But the reality is far different than just looking at the final scores. Houston led after the top of the 8th inning every single game, which is hilarious and also raises a lot of questions about the back end of Houston's bullpen. But the Cougars were as close to sweeping Kansas as Kansas was to sweeping the Cougars, frankly. It was just a matter of like one or two pitches here or there, and we were talking about Houston sweeping Kansas and not the other way around. Wildly entertaining weekend of baseball up there in Lawrence. And this is why I said at the top of the show, if I'm a Houston Cougar fan right now, I'm maybe not as distraught about being swept by Kansas as I otherwise would be, knowing, hey, we were really just kind of one or two things away from taking not one, not two, but really all three of these baseball games.
I kept heavy tabs on this one throughout the weekend. Watched probably, I don't know, 20 of the innings that were played. And at the end of it, I thought, okay, which one of these games did Houston win? Turns out it was none of them, but I could have sworn it was one of them. It just felt like they had control of not just going into the 8th inning, but they controlled a lot of innings in this one. And it felt like, man, Kansas really has got to figure out this pitching situation. And then you get Don Vagley in on Sunday, and you think, man, maybe they have figured it out. You get what he was doing maybe at the peak of his career when he was a freshman, and he had a really, really strong outing on Sunday. It's been very A to D, back to an A on the letter scale for Dom throughout the year, and really last year too. And what a refreshing pace it was for him on Sunday. And the Kansas offense showed a lot of spurts. I think that the lineup has missed the kind of smoothness that it had last year, where, okay, so-and-so's going to get on base, and then Jackson Hougy's going to drive him in, or maybe if he doesn't, Brady Ballinger's going to drive him in, where it felt like they were a lot of, okay, solo shot, especially against Texas Tech. And you thought, where does this really add up? How do you guys score 10 runs instead of maybe 6? And that's exactly what they did against Houston. I still question the strength of that bullpen, but Bodie Ray looks like a really nice piece in the Jayhawk. Again, bullpen, I didn't want to use the same word twice, but Cade Baldridge was really fun offensively. Tyson Owens, nice little redemption story for him. If you watch that TCU midweek, he got subbed out defensively, and that wasn't his first defensive miscue of the season. So it was good to see him have such a big game. He had a grand slam I believe that was to run rule Houston. No, I'm making that up. There was no run rule, but it was a walk-off grand slam is what I'm thinking of. So a nice redemption arc for him, and I'm interested to see how Kansas rolls with it, because it just something just still feels a little bit off to me, but this is a solid sweep, obviously, as all sweeps are.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked a lot about Sunday starters already on the show. If Don Vogley can be in that role and feel more comfortable, and they can get that version of him more frequently, that's a huge boon for them. I know that there's still maybe question marks about Friday. Mathis Nayrall was in that role, I believe, this week. If he can solidify the front end and they have Dom going when it's sweep time, I think that's maybe a spot where he's more comfortable. It literally might just be removing an ounce of pressure off your guy opens up, a whole new world for him mentally, and he's able to go out there and dominate like we saw back in, I believe it was 2024, 2023, whenever he was a freshman. One thing that impressed me about Kansas is kind of what you already touched on. It's just the ability to get production from throughout the lineup, different guys stepping up in big moments each day. You mentioned Tyson Owens' grand slam in the bottom of the 8th. Tyson LeBlanc had a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 8th on Friday. And then Josh Dykoff and Cade Baldridge both drove in runs in the 8th inning on Sunday. So, and by the way, none of those guys are named Jordan Bach or Brady Ballinger. So, we're starting to expand a little bit on who we're talking about here because they're starting to produce at other spots in the lineup, which is really nice to see. And it's starting to lean into one of the things that Fitz told me about a couple weeks ago when they were in Fort Worth, which was he really wanted to see his team start to barrel up the ball more consistently. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that they did that this weekend against the Cougars. Now, can you continue that moving forward? Obviously, is still a question, but it's a good sign to see more guys hitting the ball hard up and down that lineup.
I think the stat that came across my eyes just a few hours ago, I think that the Jayhawks are 39-11 in their last 50 home games, which is a pretty crazy stretch for anybody, let alone a Kansas program that historically doesn't win a lot of baseball games, period. There's just something special about how they play at home. And of course, part of that's that great fan base, but this was spring break. So it wasn't like they were keeping students off the field this weekend. I think it's very important that they continue to foster that because that wins you a lot of baseball games. But just something about sleeping in your own bed was valuable for the Jayhawks. And if you're looking at the way that maybe they've stumbled a little bit this year, you think, okay, they spent a lot of time on the road. It's good to be back home, good to be a little more relaxed. That's kind of the spin zone on that. And I hope that's the case for Kansas because it just doesn't feel like they have that magic that they did last year, but you saw some of it this weekend.
Well, and you look at who they get at home the rest of the way. I believe West Virginia makes their way to Lawrence this season, so that's a fun season to have in front of your home fans. Um, Not sure who else is on that schedule. That's just one of the series that stood out to me. But when you're talking about all of these teams that could be in the mix late in May, getting that series against West Virginia at home is maybe way more beneficial than having to head to Morgantown. And could a series win there kind of boost you up in the seeding and in the standings in the Big 12 when it matters most? That'll be something to kind of keep an eye on with the Jayhawks. You mentioned winning at home and how it's been really good to Kansas. It's been really good to Oklahoma State this year as well. And that wasn't the only good news they got on the weekend in their series win over Baylor, but it was certainly nice to see Oklahoma State kind of getting back to their version of baseball. Obviously, Colin Ritchie had Colin Ritchie moments. Campbell Smithwick, who has been kind of the walk-off guru for them this year, had a really good couple of games as well. But most importantly, they got Hudson Barrett back. And yes, he was on a pitch count. And yes, he threw on Sunday. And he only went 3 innings and 50 pitches, which was, by the way, his exact pitch count that he was at, I believe. And but it's just good to see, right? It feels like Oklahoma State is starting to get back into a rhythm. You get your Friday guy back. You know, we're still waiting for some other guys to get their Friday guy back. TCU, I'm looking at you. And hey, it feels like the momentum and the vibes and all of the kind of positivity is starting to rebuild for Oklahoma State right now. And we talked preseason about how Oklahoma State's one of those teams that it doesn't find itself outside of the top 4 very often. This might kind of kickstart their run back towards the top of the standings as well.
No question about that. I can see the pieces coming together when you look at the rotation. Talking about, forget exactly who it was, that really strong rotation we talked about earlier that UCF has. You can see some of that with what Oklahoma State has when they're healthy. You get Mario Pesca, who was really good on Saturday. Barrett's back. Whether that's how long he'll be pitching on Sunday, who knows? I would imagine not long. And then you start the weekend off with Ethan Lund, who recorded 10 strikeouts. So you have a really solid 1, 2, 3, no matter what order you decide to put them in. And I'm intrigued by that concept, but the health around this Oklahoma State team continues to define them. I would say, though, that Brock Thompson has really proven to be one of the best players in the league. I've really enjoyed his sophomore, not even a breakout because he had a really strong year last year too. But he just feels like he does everything for this Oklahoma State team. Right when they need the most, he hits to all fields. He can leave the yard. He can just simply get on base. He's a really fun player to watch. And it's just guys like that make Oklahoma State go. And when they lost on Friday this weekend, I'll admit I picked Baylor in the pick'em. Felt like that they were a little bit susceptible. The Cowboys were to a series loss. Felt like Baylor was due to pick up a big one on the road. So I was impressed that they were able to win on Saturday and Sunday because that doesn't feel very Oklahoma State, especially after they got swept against UCF to start Big 12 play.
I agree with you there. From a Baylor perspective, you take Friday and then you can't get it done Saturday in a 5-3 loss, and things kind of get away from you on Sunday in a 13-6 loss. Brady Janusek continues to have a great season. He had 3 RBIs, a triple, and a home run over the weekend. Travis Sanders continues to have a great season. He had a couple RBIs and a home run as well. But they've got to start getting more production from other spots in the lineup. There are some gaps there right now. Tice Armstrong has not been as consistent as maybe they had hoped. He's had some really, really great moments and some pretty not great moments as well at the plate. And then pitching wise, it's kind of the question that we were asking ourselves with the Bears coming into the year was, hey, we know that the top end talent is there. We know that they've got guys that are capable of competing at an all conference level, but how well is the depth going to support that talent? And I think that's still kind of a question mark for Baylor at this point in the season.
it'll be important to watch how far these Baylor starters continue to go into games, see how stretched out they are. It feels like, based on the number of innings, they've got to have one of the more experienced bullpens in the country. Just the way that they turn it over to them so quickly, and they let guys go an inning, and you got a new one ready to go, which is a nice thing to see on paper. But you're looking at 2-4 in the Big 12, which is still very early. You're still tied with TCU and Arizona, which you would have signed up for that a month ago. But the Bears are in a phase where it feels like they have an opportunity to compete in the top half of the league, and you're going to have to win 2 out of 3 in this kind of series, where, especially when you take it on Friday and you think, man, this could be our time. And it just feels like they're an inch away. And Mitch Thompson talks about margins a lot, and whether margins actually means anything to anybody out there other than coaches is to be seen. But I'm excited to see what Baylor does about that. But right now I'm getting nervous about how big the margin actually is.
Yeah, and you look at their upcoming weekend, you can talk about margins with them, and you can talk about margins with Houston, and those two teams are facing off this weekend. So this is an opportunity. I mean, if you're Houston and if you're Baylor, you're both kind of looking at this weekend like, yes, okay, now's the time to start to make our move. I think that's going to lead to some really fun and high quality baseball between those two teams this weekend. So be keeping an eye on that. But yeah, the Bears, it's kind of start, when you're a jockey and you know that the guys out in front are, just maybe 5 or 6 lengths ahead. Okay, well, we can't let it get to 8 or 10 lengths ahead. So it's time to start making our move here. If you're the Baylor Bears, a team that is very clearly making its move and has been making its move really since the start of the season is the West Virginia Mountaineers. They sweep BYU 7-4, 12-10, 11-1 in 8 innings. Up and down the lineup, dominant. Pitching rotation Friday and Sunday, absolutely dominant. They get one of the more dominant and impressive relief appearances that we've seen in the Big 12 this season from Ian Korn on Saturday. I mean, I don't have much to say about West Virginia insofar as I'm going to let you wax poetic about them. Just this was the most impressive team I looked at this weekend. I know that BYU got a series win against Cincinnati, but this is a good offense for BYU. It showed signs again this weekend of being a good offense, but West Virginia was dominant and wildly impressive to me.
Yeah, BYU definitely had their moments, but West Virginia weathered those storms very nicely, which is something that I was glad to see, because it feels like we keep talking about West Virginia's strength of schedule. They haven't had a ton of challenges, so it was good to see them get a little bit of a challenge from BYU, who you didn't expect that from heading into the year. We'll see how real they are, but Gavin Kelly continues to be one of the best players in this league, a total beacon of consistency. Feels like you're going to get 2 hits and at least an RBI out of him every single night. Brody Kresser will give you some flavor. He had I think it was a walk-off grand slam a few weeks ago. He had 3 RBIs on Friday, which was the second game of that series. I'm very intrigued about how coaches think about playing BYU on a Thursday, because your weekend's over by Saturday, maybe afternoon. That's something we can go down a little bit later, but this West Virginia offense is really deep. Sean Smith got in the action. I think he's a transfer from Georgia Southern. Don't quote me on that. Something like that. But Gavin Kelly is so unbelievable in that offense. He feels like the absolute glue guy in this league, and the way that he brings that lineup together is just so nice. And then Max Yell on Sunday, we don't know how long this rotation is going to stick, because Dawson had some bad luck on Friday. He sticks around on Friday. Max looks like Max Scherzer on Sunday and is really strong there. Right now they're cooking with gasoline, and Steve Saban's probably just not going to touch anything. But wow, I hope that this continues for the Mountaineers throughout conference play, because they do really look like not just one of the best teams in the Big 12. They probably are the best team in the Big 12, but I know we have them top 15 in the country. I think they're more like top 20 everywhere else.
I've seen them. I think 14 through 17 is kind of where they're ranked in the varying polls this week. Yeah, Max Yell. Not to beat a dead horse, but we've talked about Sunday starters a lot. Max Yell is the one I think that kind of stands out above the rest right now. To me, he's the guy that could most clearly be a Friday guy pretty much anywhere else in the league, except for 1 or 2 places. And just what a gift that is, right? To have a guy who can consistently give you 7 and strike out double digits on the last day of the weekend, whether that be Saturday or Sunday. Phenomenal guy. And it's just so cool to see after he missed all of 2025, right? To have him rebound this well, this quickly from a season ending injury a year ago we should probably be talking more about Maxiell at a national level, folks. So let's go ahead and start doing that right now. Also, Paul Schoenfeld reached base 13 times over the weekend. He was 8 for 10 at the plate, and he walked 5 times. So they BYU didn't really have a solution for West Virginia's center fielder all weekend. He was pretty great, and then Tyrus Hall stole 3 bases on Sunday, including home, which was a very fun clip to see on social media. And this is an impressive West Virginia bunch. And as we kind of get into the next phase of the show here, talking about matchups this weekend, we can lead off there once we get through these midweek games, because I know that we both kind of have some ideas of what we want to see from West Virginia and Arizona State this weekend. But first, midweek matchups, man. I think as we are recording this, Arizona State is about to start a game. I forgot who they are playing on this beautiful Monday night. I believe it's UNLV. That is first pitch at like 8 p.m. Central. Let me double check that. That is right. I am right. I am smart. Arizona State and UNLV will play on Monday night. And then what else kind of intrigues you about the midweek slate for the Big 12 this week?
Well, I would say that I've seen UNLV in person this year, so I know that they can hit the ball a little bit. I've also seen them get shut out. So there's a little bit of a black and white there to them. Houston versus Texas is really fun because it feels like Texas really struggles in midweeks against programs like Lamar. How do they handle a program like Houston that's a little bit higher major on paper? Not even a little bit. They actively are. Oklahoma State and Missouri State is fun. That feels like it gets played all the time. That's a 2022 Stillwater Regional Classic where both teams scored like 30 runs each. Missouri State has one of the better players in the country in Caden Bogenpole. I think that's how it's pronounced, like a top 2 round MLB draft pick for the Bears. That'll be a name to watch if you're tuning into that one. And then the Holy War. How about that in the middle of the week? And then you also get Cincy Xavier. There's bound to be some benches cleared in the Big 12 this week, or in the Big East if you prescribe to Xavier being the problem in that. And then TCU, DBU, like you touched on, that feels like a litmus test for the Frogs a little bit.
Yeah,
and then, of course, I'm going to stop you. K-State, Nebraska. How could I not mention that one? I've been waiting on the Huskers to be ranked. They had won like 11 games in a row heading into this weekend, and then took 2 or 3 from Michigan, and I thought that's not going to be enough for them to get national love. It felt like they had to beat maybe an Oregon later on in the year, but good on them to earn a top 25 ranking. They are every bit of a top 25 team. And that'll be a good one for K-State, especially a K-State program that has kind of built their roster on guys who got rejected by Nebraska. Homegrown Lincoln guys. AJ Avasco didn't hear from Nebraska. A couple other guys, Ty Smolinski, not a great relationship with the Nebraska staff. That's not all my story to tell, but it'll be personal for the Wildcats.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to that one in Manhattan. You mentioned kind of the benches clearing with Cincinnati Xavier. TCU and DBU do not like each other either. There were a couple instances in recent years where DBU's first baseman was overly physical at the bag with runners coming down the baseline and coming back into first base, and also overly physical when he himself was running to first base. And coaches kind of got after it between Sarlos and Dan Hefner. The players got after each other. The first baseman for DBU actually in the second game, I believe last year or 2 years ago in Fort Worth, was ejected for the way he ran through first base and made contact with TCU's first baseman. So no love lost between those two crosstown rivals either. This is a big game for DBU. It's kind of one of their high water mark midweek games. Now that they've gotten into conference play, very much looking forward to that one. I will be over there in Dallas, taking that one in at 6:30 on Tuesday. And then, you look at the last one there, Grand Canyon traveling to Arizona. Hey, Arizona, like if there's any time to kind of just get a lick in while you can. Grand Canyon's a little bit down this year. Obviously, you're really banged up. Maybe this is an opportunity just to get one on the right column in the ledger. And then a couple interesting games on Wednesday as well, with Sac State traveling to Kansas and New Mexico State traveling to Arizona State. I watched New Mexico State play this past weekend in Fort Worth. They had 2 solo home runs by a guy who had hit one all year and a grand slam, and then immediately folded and got run rolled after that. So an opportunity for Arizona State to maybe stat pad a little bit there as well. Getting into the weekend. series of the weekend. I think we can agree that it is West Virginia traveling to Arizona State.
I would agree with that. That's if we're declaring that Arizona State's already won the league, then this is your chance to respond. West Virginia. Again, I'm not going to say you. I won't say me,
Yeah.
but this is West Virginia's chance to respond to that claim.
Well, what are you looking forward to most about this series?
The pitching, I would say, stands out to me. We've talked so much about Dawson Montesa. Maxiel continues to be dominant on Sunday. How does that mesh against the Arizona State offense that has scored a million runs when they've won games? And then we saw them really struggle in Arlington against quality pitching. Where does West Virginia compare to teams that Arizona State has teed off on versus teams that Arizona State has been silenced on? You think back to Arlington, Cole Carlone got hurt in that game. How much did that impact them? We'll never really know the answer to that, but this feels like a quality test for both teams and one that Arizona State maybe hasn't seen entirely since Arlington and one that West Virginia probably has not seen this season.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to how the pitching holds up for West Virginia against this offense. Like we've mentioned, it's been a little bit of a lighter non-conference slate and entry into Big 12 play for the Mountaineers, and so no time like the present to know what you've got in your starting rotation if you're Steve Sabins and his coaching staff. And yeah, if they come away with 2 or 3 here, I think they're the clear front runner in the league. If Arizona State comes away with 2 or 3 here, I think they're the clear front runner in the league. So it'll be kind of a defining moment early on in the Big 12 for both of those teams. Moving on, Oklahoma State hits the road. Now they got some health, got some wealth. They're hitting the road and they're going to Provo to play BYU, who's heading home and licking wounds and hopefully, got their sights focused on another surprise series win like they got in weekend 1. When it comes to the Cougars and the Cowboys, what are you looking forward to?
Seeing how Oklahoma State adapts, because we've seen them look really good and we've seen them look kind of shaky in Big 12 play, and it's only been 2 weeks. I'm excited to see which one of those teams is real and how does BYU now return home. You talk about their opening weekend victory over Cincinnati. That was really great. They looked competitive this past weekend, which BYU is real. So this almost feels like a repeat of this past weekend for both of these teams. Show us who you really are. And apparently BYU is a tough place to play, just as Cincinnati. So let's see what Oklahoma State's able to do in that kind of environment instead of, like you said, celebrating wins at home.
Maybe the altitude has a little bit to do with it. Maybe there's just a comfort factor there for BYU. I'm really interested to see which Ashton Johnson shows up because that seems to be critical for BYU. If they get the elite version of Ashton Johnson, they tend to be in more ball games and win more ball games. And when he gets knocked around a little bit like he did in Morgantown, that's really kind of the final death knell, I think, for the ball club on that given day. And then Easton Jones is a guy who's been swinging a really hot bat. Crew McChesney, Ezra McNaughton have both been hitting the ball really hard for BYU. If it gets down to it, can you just outscore somebody? I don't know if Oklahoma State's the team that they'd be able to do that against, but again, some pitching questions there. Recovery isn't always linear for guys like Hudson Barrett, so we'll just see how things go in that series. Another really intriguing series, Kansas hits the road again, goes to Cincinnati. We've talked about some of the starting pitching questions for Kansas and some of the fireworks we've seen from Cincinnati's lineup. This could be a really interesting weekend.
Cincinnati at home feels like gasoline meets matches, and right now this Kansas pitching staff also feels a little bit like matches, whether that's for better or for worse for the Jayhawks. Which not K-State, very different. Which Kansas pitching staff will we see?
You were going to get text messages about this.
Yeah,
by the way,
I'm in big trouble here. But at this point, maybe it's a compliment. I don't know. But even when Kansas has looked, I almost did it again. Even when Kansas has looked really good the last 2 years, Cincinnati has still been that kryptonite. Even when they were headed out to Cincinnati with some momentum, I think they got swept maybe 2 years ago. And then last season, Cincinnati went down to Lawrence in May and really took it right to them. And it feels like Bischel owns something in that dugout for Kansas. So it feels like this could be a real momentum grabber for the Jayhawks that we've kind of been waiting for. At least I have, when I say that the magic is missing. This could be the magic, or it could be Cincinnati's really, really good.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups where it feels like both teams are in similar spots where you're gonna get some good arms at some point. We've seen the really good version of Nate Taylor the last couple of weeks. Will that continue against a Jayhawks lineup that feels like it's getting a little bit of momentum, a little wind in its sails? And then can you get that production at the same level up and down Kansas's lineup? If that's the case, then anything is possible against the Cincinnati bullpen that has seemed kind of susceptible at times this year, with evidence of that against Utah, kind of up and down the box scores all over the weekend. So, this is one of those series where I don't think we'll know the outcome until the final out of each of these games. And I would not be shocked if we looked at these box scores after the weekend and said, wow, they changed leads and tied like 7 or 8 times every single game. Like this could be a very back and forth affair between these two ball clubs.
It's probably a bad day to be at the creative department at either of these schools this weekend. Just so many typing errors that are bound to happen, and there's going to be exclamation points. It's going to be awesome for us sitting at home.
You got to have multiple people in the clipping tool this weekend, I think, if you're both of these teams, because you're going to have to be producing content with the way that these offenses are moving. Arizona travels to Orlando. This is kind of another benchmark weekend, I think, for the Knights in their quest to move up the standings and gain a little bit more of a reputation in the Big 12. Arizona obviously is down. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But they're still a capable pitching staff, I think, at the very least. And they've still got decent production in some spots of the lineup. And that means you can't really overlook them. They were pretty close to taking 2 of 3 from Texas Tech. Obviously couldn't get the job done there. And for UCF, I think this is an opportunity to really establish yourself and say, no, the first 2 weekends were not flukes. We did what we did because we're really good. And we're going to show you guys that again this weekend with our starting pitching, with our top to bottom lineup. They might be getting Austin Jacobs back at second base, which would be a pretty big boost for them as well. And that's just, this is an opportunity, I think, for UCF and the danger zone for Arizona State if they haven't already kind of moved beyond that.
This is the kind of series that if you're UCF and you want to actually be a pretender or a contender in this league, did the K-State KU thing again. If you want to be a contender in this league, this is the kind of series you win against an Arizona team that doesn't really know where their feet are right now. And it's simply one that if you're for real, you'll take 2 or 3 and you'll turn heads doing it because people still see that Arizona logo and think good program, whether they're winning games or not. But what a crazy series this is. This is realignment at its finest. When 2 years ago or 3 years ago, these two teams were in different conferences that were not the Big 12. But Arizona UCF, it's a Big 12 classic.
And it's a 2 time zone travel right now. Actually, it's a 3 time zone travel right now because Arizona's currently on Pacific time. Obviously, Florida is not. And so Arizona is going to be traveling 3 hours in the future for this series. Very interesting. I talked about my conversation with Rich Wallace at the beginning of the show. He also, I asked him, I said, what's it like being one of the only teams that will have to travel across multiple time zones to play in your conference's championship tournament? And he said, it sucks, but it's a reality that we have to deal with. And this weekend, they're actually the beneficiaries of the time zone travel. So we'll see if in one of those few instances, if they can take full advantage of that as well. Maybe pull the fire alarm at Arizona's hotel or something like that. An in-state rivalry that I'm really looking forward to seeing this weekend is Texas Tech once again leaving the friendly confines of the RIP out there in Lubbock and heading to a very pitcher-friendly ballpark at Lupton Stadium in Fort Worth against TCU. This is, I think, a big test for Texas Tech because TCU's pitching has been down. It's very gettable right now. The Frogs are gettable. If your offense can produce at the level that it has been producing both at home and places like High Corbett, then I think we can stamp Texas Tech as being a legit threat in the Big 12 this year. So, looking forward to seeing that from Texas Tech. On the other side of things, can TCU do the little things right to keep themselves in ball games and give guys like Sawyer Strohsnyder the opportunity to win them ball games? If you look at most of TCU's losses this year, they've been down multiple runs, if not a ton of runs, before they've gotten through the lineup once. And so can you give the bats a room to breathe, really, is kind of what I'm looking for from TCU this weekend.
feels like a litmus test for both these teams where they're at, and it also, as far as the Big 12 pick'em that we do goes, it feels like a I can't quit you week for TCU, but if you disappoint me, I will quit you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see how I handle both these teams a week from now, because it really does feel like a huge separation for both these programs, and I didn't see that coming with Texas Tech and TCU. But that's why they play the games.
It is why they play the games. I'd be lying if I said I saw it coming as well. I thought both teams would be in pretty different situations at this point, and they certainly are not. Um, Speaking of teams that are in fact in different situations, Utah hosts Kansas State, the Wildcats, not the Jayhawks, Noah, for a home series at America First Ballpark, where the Utes seem to just really like to play. All the good vibes, the new car smell of a new baseball stadium, in Kansas State, maybe with a little fire in their belly with the way things turned out against Arizona State, looking for something to prove.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. It kind of reminds you of, what was it? Not BYU. Whichever one was offense against hitting. I forget which one that was. My memory is just really costing me today.
This
Um,
weekend,
yeah, I think so. Maybe
UCF Arizona.
it could be.
Okay.
But it feels like it's going to be how strong is the Utah pitching, because it showed highlights at certain points. Coulter McNally going 5 no-hit innings before he kind of fell apart, versus a K-State offense that, even though they lost 2 or 3 to Arizona State, is still one of the best offenses in the league and can light a fire in a hurry. Because even that game when the Sun Devils were able to have an 8-run ninth inning, it was D. Kennedy who forced the backs against the wall of the Sun Devils. They went into that inning trailing. So even then, this K-State offense is capable of putting you on the ropes, and Utah is also capable of leaning against the ropes. The question is, what does that bullpen look like against still a really, really good offense?
Yeah, looking forward to that. Hopefully, Kansas State shows what they're capable of. I would love to see Utah kind of say no, home is home for us, and we're not losing a lot of ball games here this year, because that would make the Big 12 race much more interesting over the next 8 weeks of the season. Last but definitely not least, Baylor travels to Houston, another in-state competition here in the state of Texas. And like I mentioned earlier, both of these teams really are kind of thin on the margins at this point, to borrow a phrase from you, Noah. And I'm curious to see how they both handle that, because a weekend like this could kind of generate some momentum. It could kill the vibes in the locker room. I don't want that for either of those programs as far as vibe killing goes, because I think they're both very fun baseball teams. But neither of them have been stringing together a ton of wins right now, and at some point you kind of just gotta show it.
It feels like one of these guys are going to emerge with a lot of confidence underneath themselves. They both kind of need a series win. They could both really use a sweep, but the other one, like you allude to, would not feel great about losing this series. And that's not necessarily a testament to either team being a bad loss necessarily, as much as just it keeps piling on. And they both need their rays of sunshine, and they both deserve it in their own sense. I think they're both good teams, but who can be better over a 3-game stretch? And it's margins, like Mitch Thompson loves to say, and this feels like a very marginal series, because if you win this one, it feels like you can continue to steal 1 game here, 2 games there, and put together a good resume. But if you go 0-3 against Houston or go 0-3 against Baylor, that's gonna stink.
It is going to stink, and it probably puts you in that first chair, looking on the outside looking in for the Big 12 tournament as well. I mean, if we're being honest, like, obviously there's still a lot of time left in the season, a lot of time to make up ground. But if you're Houston and you lose 2 of 3, you're sitting there at 2-7. If you get swept, you're 1-8, and things are starting to really look bleak for Todd Whitting's crew. So I know that his seat isn't necessarily terribly secure at this point. I would love for it to get more secure with a series win here, but at the same time, with Mitch Thompson, you have an opportunity to maybe get above 500 in league play, and that would be a huge step towards accomplishing some of Baylor's goals this year. So, it's definitely kind of immovable object, unstoppable force kind of situation here, in maybe a little bit smaller terms.
Before we wrap up, there's a tangent I've been thinking about that you kind of just put back in my head. It's
Yeah.
completely irrelevant. So we're at minute, I'm not going to say that number. We're at minute 70 of the program. So I apologize, but I thought about it kind of earlier in the week. Imagine walking up to your boss, us, those of us who live normal lives, are not coaches, and using coach speak to describe your own work performance. And you just got me thinking of that. Like, how does Todd Whitting go to his AD? Does he sit and say, "Yeah, we've got to win in the margins. We've got to, just daily habits." Imagine saying that to your boss. And I think I'm going to try it out one day. But that was just a tangent I thought of when you watch these NCAA tournament, mid game press conferences. What do you have to do to get back in this game? What do you have to do to get me those reports by the end of the week? Daily habits, winning in the margins.
Yep.
Some things just don't fly.
I've got to win. I've got to win every keystroke on this keyboard, right? I got to win every pitch. I can't make a typo. Here we go. All right, we're locked in. Can't get too far ahead. Can't think about the next sentence that we're writing.
Yeah. Right.
Got to stay locked into this sentence right here. Make sure it's we give it everything we got. Got to get 1% better every day with
All
these
about mental
CPS
toughness
reports.
and elite preparation.
That's right. And by the way, it's much about off the field as on the field, right? We're making men. We're making young men here. So we got to remember that. Got to keep our heads steady when it comes to that kind of thing. This has been another episode of the Flyover League. Thank you once again for joining and listening. The show continues to grow. More people are listening every week. That's very exciting for Noah and myself. If you are one of those people who have just found us recently, make sure that you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. Go over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button as well, and share this content with a friend if you know someone else who's really invested in a Big 12 baseball team. We'll be talking about them every week here on the Flyover League, whereas they may get passed over other places. They won't get passed over here. This is a safe haven for Big 12 baseball fans, and we're here for you. So until next time, he's Noah Darling. I'm Jamie Plunkett, and we'll talk to you then.